Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome to qualifying day at the Chinese Grand Prix, the second race of 2026, of course, only a week after the first Grand Prix in Melbourne. And yeah, we are here at what is a very sunny, dry Shanghai circuit for qualifying today, which is going to be not as exciting as what we had, last year, which was a bit more of a competitive fight towards the front of the field. Today, it is going to be very much dominated by Mercedes-Benz, who have dominated the weekend overall. We have, of course, earlier today, I think finishing about a couple hours ago now, the sprint race in China. And I will get into the results of that sprint race and just quickly surmise what happened in the sprint in China. But yeah, we're here for obviously for qualifying to see what the grid setup will be for the race itself. Yeah, unfortunately, looks like it's only one team that's going to be, on the front row and getting pole position. But the fight behind that is looking still interesting and close. It's not, an entirely foregone conclusion as to who's going to end up where in regards to that battle. So yeah, still some interest, obviously, for qualifying, but really, in terms of the fight for pole, if Mercedes don't lock out the front row, then I would be massively surprised by that, to be honest, because they are clearly, over a single lap, they are just miles ahead of the rest of the teams. So yeah, that is unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. Obviously, we've had Mercedes dominance in the past, so it's not exactly something that we're not familiar with. But yeah, obviously in the build up to qualifying, as we've got, as you can see, just under an hour and a half to go until the session begins. We'll go through the data from this weekend and really the data from sprint qualifying, which gives us a really good indication as to what will probably happen in this qualifying session. We'll go through the results, the sector times, just to analyze, where certain teams are really showing good pace. And then we'll get into as well, in a moment, the championship standings after the sprint race, because of course there are some points on offer for the sprint, so we'll get into that in a moment. And then obviously I'll give my predictions ahead of this session in a moment. And then obviously I want to hear from you guys in the chat. What do you think's going to happen? Where do you think certain teams like Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull really struggling this weekend? Red Bull did not score a point in the sprint, even though Max Verstappen finished the sprint. Red Bull are in big trouble this weekend. Yeah, let me know how you think those teams are going to do and what you expect from them in qualifying. Of course, there's a poll running in the chat where I've asked you guys who you think is going to take pole position. Only two options in the poll because there are only two possibilities. Either George Russell or Kimi Antonelli will take pole. So, make sure to cast your vote in that poll. Who do you think takes pole position for the Chinese Grand Prix, Russell or Antonelli? And then once we get to say the start of Q3, we'll see who you guys have decided to vote for. And yeah, we'll get into that, obviously, like I said, right before we get into the last few minutes of qualifying. As well, quickly, just want to say, hello to all you guys. Hope you all well, whether it's, early morning for us, Europeans, or it's, late night for, people in North America. I know on the East Coast of America, it's, I think, just gone midnight about half an hour ago. So, yeah, hope you guys are doing well. Obviously, hope everyone around the world who is watching this is doing well, no matter whatever circumstances you're going through. Yeah, hope you're all doing well and hope you can join me today in watching along and enjoying qualifying for the Chinese Grand Prix. Let's hope it'll be maybe a bit more of an interesting session than I have already said it probably will be. But yeah, we'll get into why, it should be a very regular session in a moment. But before we get into qualifying and what happened in sprint qualifying yesterday, which gives us, really good data to look at for this session, let's just quickly touch on the sprint race. Once again, Mercedes getting not good starts. Russell was able to maintain the lead of the sprint into the first corner, but Ferrari were again electric at the start of the race and were able to properly take on Mercedes at times in that sprint. Mercedes were still overall, quite a bit quicker than Ferrari in the sprint. The race pace data has been released, and Mercedes were about 0.3 a lap quicker than Ferrari in that sprint. But yeah, Ferrari again taking advantage of their great starts, and that's what's able to get them into that dogfight with Mercedes. When if they weren't able to get those great starts, Mercedes would just run and hide. Kimi Antonelli had an absolutely awful start from second, and he dropped way down the field, then got a 10-second penalty for colliding with Isaac Hadjar, which I got to say, I thought 10 seconds was a bit harsh considering, I saw the incident, and yeah, I mean, he did force Hadjar off track, but it didn't feel like a 10-second penalty to me. I think 5 seconds would have been more appropriate, but there you go. I mean, Antonelli was definitely at fault for that incident, but yeah, 10 seconds, like I said, just thought that was a bit excessive. And then, yeah, Antonelli eventually recovered to finish 5th, which is, not too bad of a result considering the poor start he had and the penalty. But yeah, overall, George Russell won the sprint, just about from Leclerc in 2nd, and then Hamilton 3rd, and then in 4th, you had Lando Norris, good drive from him. 5th, Antonelli. 6th, Oscar Piastri. 7th, not 7th, Behrman. He was 8th. Liam Lawson, 7th. Very impressive result considering Lawson started, I think, 13th. Yeah, great result for him in Racing Bulls. Couple extra points there. And then, yeah, 8th at the final points position, Oliver Behrman. Max Verstappen was only 9th. And Red Bull, in that sprint race, they were, I think it was at least half a second a lap slower than Mercedes in the sprint. But I think it was quite a bit worse than that. Well, yeah, it was quite a bit worse than that. They were 1.9 seconds per lap slower than Mercedes. And that's, by the way, for people that watch the sprint, that doesn't include laps after the safety car restart because, yeah, some drivers pitted and others did not. If they have that type of race pace on Sunday, they're going to get lapped pretty comfortably. They're going to get lapped. So, yeah, that is disgracefully bad from Red Bull. And Racing Bulls even were quicker by nearly 0.2 of a second a lap. So, yeah, just wow. So, yeah, Red Bull. I again, as I said in my qualifying preview stream that I did a few hours ago, I didn't think they would be good here. But I didn't think they would be this bad, where they are pretty much midfield cannon fodder. That is quite the surprise. So, yeah, I just really am shocked by that. But the car, Max has said all weekend, it's felt, horrible, undrivable pretty much. So, what do you expect at the end of the day? Red Bull, that is their weakness, is, the corners at the end of the day. So, yeah, Red Bull not looking in good shape and not being able to score a point in the sprint. But let's now get into how the championship standings look after the sprint. So George Russell in the lead, 11 points clear of Kimi Antonelli and Charles Leclerc, both on 22 points. Antonelli 2nd, Leclerc 3rd. Lewis Hamilton only 4 points behind in 4th. Lando Norris comfortably 5th. Max Verstappen in 6th, only on 8 points. With Oliver Behrman only a point behind. 7 points for him. And then Arvid Lindblad on 4 points. Piastri into the top 10. Now he's got points on the board. 3 points for him. And then Gabriel Bortoleto, 10th for Audi. After tomorrow's race, Russell will still comfortably be in the lead, but we might have possibly a Ferrari in second in the championship. And I'd imagine Oscar Piastri will be at least 7th in the championship by the end of tomorrow's race. Maybe even 6th ahead of Max Verstappen, depending on obviously how Verstappen's race goes. I do think Red Bull will have a better qualifying today than what they had yesterday. Remember, the teams are still allowed to change the setup up until qualifying. So surely they will continue working on that and surely find a better solution there for Max and just their, 2 cars in general. On the constructors' side, Mercedes 15 points clear of Ferrari, already a gap being made between Mercedes and Ferrari and the rest. McLaren in 3rd on 18 points, then Red Bull 4th on 8 points, only a point clear of Haas, who are only a point clear of Racing Bulls. Audi 7th on 2 points, Alpine 8th with 1 point, and then Williams, Cadillac and Aston Martin on 0 points. And those 3 teams, I think, are going to have 0 points on the board for quite a while because all 3 of those teams are miles off the pace that you need to be really, contending properly in a normal race for points. And if I just go back to the race pace data from the sprint, just to illustrate how bad certain teams were. So yeah, Mercedes were 3/10 quicker per lap than Ferrari. McLaren were about 6/10 off the pace of Mercedes, and then a big gap to Racing Bulls, 1.8 seconds per lap off the pace. Red Bull, 1.9 seconds off, and then Audi, Haas, and Williams, 2.1 seconds off. Williams, actually, a much better race pace than qualifying pace. As well, Aston Martin, not too bad. They were only 2.5 seconds a lap off the pace, and only about 0.4 a lap slower than Audi, Haas, Williams. So, I mean, that's way better than what we saw in Melbourne. So, they've clearly made a lot of progress there. And then Cadillac for the 7.5 tenths slower than Aston Martin per lap. So, in terms of race pace, it does feel like it's, I wouldn't say closer here than it was in Melbourne, but certain teams not as far off the pace as what we saw in qualifying. So yeah, but I think the biggest part of that data is what do you call it? Red Bull just absolutely miles off the pace. But anyway, that's the sprint. That's what the championship standings are now going into the rest of the weekend. And we'll see if there's any major changes to that in the race. Obviously, qualifying will be important in deciding, who most likely finishes where. But let's get into the results from sprint qualifying, which took place yesterday. Again, having sprint qualifying, this is the problem, I think, with having a sprint weekend, is it gives away the game early in terms of revealing pretty much where all the teams are at, and it kind of spoils qualifying, and in turn the sprint race I think kind of spoils the race itself as well. Even though people say, "Oh, I prefer sprint sessions to practice sessions," I get that, but it spoils the rest of the weekend because looking at this sprint qualifying data, even from just viewing it hours ago before the sprint race, again, pretty clear. Mercedes have got the fastest car. Red Bull, again, very slow. And then McLaren and Ferrari, in quali trim, are on very similar pace. McLaren, actually, in sprint qualifying, looked like they were probably maybe a tenth or so quicker. overall. I know it ended up being a lot closer than between Norris and Hamilton, but yeah, it was looking a lot more favourable, say, for McLaren, who again in the sprint, with in terms of race pace, McLaren dropping off quite a bit compared to, say, Ferrari. And I mean, they didn't really drop off in race pace compared to Mercedes, compared to what the gap was in qualifying or sprint qualifying. But it was, they didn't gain anything either, as we clearly can see here. But yeah, Mercedes comfortably quicker. And then McLaren and Ferrari, again, on very similar pace. And that is the main battle to look out for, is for third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. Where will the McLarens and the Ferraris relative to each other end up? That's the main battle to look out for today. Because, of course, with Ferrari getting these great starts, if they ended up fourth and sixth in sprint qualifying, if they can get third on the grid, maybe they can get into the lead on the first lap tomorrow. It really could make a big difference there, even though Mercedes still have way too much for Ferrari over a race distance in terms of race pace, which I think we clearly saw in the sprint, and we obviously saw in Melbourne as well. But yeah, Norris ended up third, Hamilton fourth, Piastri fifth, Leclerc sixth. Leclerc, though, definitely did not do his best lap, the best lap he possibly could have done in sprint qualifying 3. And then Pierre Gasly seventh. Not quite sure why Gasly didn't finish in the top 8 in the sprint, but yeah, Gasly very quick in sprint qualifying. And then look at that, Max Verstappen 8th, 1.7 seconds away from pole. And not only that, just over a second slower than McLaren and Ferrari. And you could legitimately say Red Bull are a midfield team this weekend, even with Max in the car. I mean, they're lucky that Max is in the car, because if he wasn't, then they would be barely able even to get into the top 10. Their car is, just absolutely terrible, given the expectation level that we all have for it. Oliver Behrman then in 9th. Haas have looked competitive all weekend, and good to see Behrman got a point in the sprint. Obviously, scored points in the first race, points in the sprint, and hopefully for him gets points in the race as well to keep up his good start to the season. And then Isaac Hadjar ended up in 10th. Obviously, his sprint race was ruined by Kimi Antonelli colliding with him. And then the rest of the field, it was Nico Hülkenberg 11th in the Audi. And then in 12th place, it was Esteban Ocon. Very close, those two, to getting into the final part of qualifying or sprint qualifying. Liam Lawson then 13th, which again just shows you how great of a sprint he had. Started 13th, and he ended up finishing 7th in the sprint. Great result for him. Gabriel Bortoleto 14th, and then Arvid Lindblad 15th. Colapinto, poor performance from him in sprint qualifying, in 16th, and then 17th Sainz, 18th Albon, 19th Alonso, 20th Stroll, 21st Bottas, and Perez didn't do a lap in sprint qualifying. So let's get into the sector time data just to illustrate just where certain teams are really losing the time, such as Red Bull, and where certain teams like Mercedes are really showing their dominance. So the first sector, half of it is full throttle, half of it is, slow speed corners. McLaren looking very good through the first sector, half a tenth quicker than Mercedes. Ferrari definitely could do better through this part of the lap. 2 tenths off is not great for them, and I think they could definitely close that gap in the first sector. Then there's a couple tenths of a drop off to Alpine, another tenth to Haas, and then Red Bull already half a second off McLaren just in the first sector, which again just illustrates that through the corners, the Red Bull is just awful. It's in a different universe, obviously in a negative way, compared to the top three teams. They are just nowhere near as strong with the levels of grip they've got compared to McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari. So, yeah, Red Bull, from aerodynamic perspective, it is a midfield level car this weekend. And then a slight drop off then to Audi, Racing Bulls, Williams. And then again, surprisingly, from sprint qualifying, Cadillac were quicker than Aston Martin in the first sector, which is quite the surprise. The middle sector, once again, shows just how good certain cars are through some of the really important corners here. The Mercedes and McLaren pretty close on performance, only half a tenth separating those two teams. Ferrari a tenth and a half off in the middle sector. Again, I think Ferrari can be a bit quicker through this part of the lap, to be honest. So I do feel like there's more time to be found. Not loads more, but definitely, maybe a few hundredths at least more lap time, which can make the difference in qualifying. Alpine, very competitive they were in the middle sector. By far the strongest midfield team. But look at Red Bull, sixth best team, and that's with Isaac Hadjar. 7 tenths pretty much slower than Mercedes in just the middle sector. And that's not entirely down to, battery and all of that stuff. That is playing a role to a degree, but I think not to that level. I really don't believe it is. So, yeah, Red Bull just don't have a car through the corners that could be competitive whatsoever with those front three teams. The only thing Red Bull can do is just try and finish at the head of the midfield pack, pretty much, which would be, 7th place, because, again, through the corners, they are just miles away, absolutely miles away. And as you can see, after the first two sectors, they're over a second slower, pretty much, than those front three teams. If you're losing a second after the first two sectors to the front three teams, you're not in the same fight as them, quite frankly. You're just not. Again, I didn't think they would be good this weekend, but this bad is, quite the shock, I must say. Now they're only slightly quicker than Racing Bulls and Audi, or Audi and then Racing Bulls. Williams also pathetic, 1.2 seconds off the pace, a second slower than Alpine even in the middle sector. Their car also, from an aero point of view, is just rubbish. And they were only barely quicker than Aston Martin and even Cadillac. Just shows you how bad the Williams is. In terms of Mercedes, though, again, it's the whole battery stuff. That's why they are so far ahead. And obviously, they do have a strong engine, period, in terms of outright power. Because, 3 tenths of a second they are gaining on the next best team being Ferrari in just the final sector. That's, half the gap that they are ahead overall for the lap being made up in just the final sector. And that's what's deciding it. So, you could do as well as you can in the first two sectors, hit every apex and be basically perfect, but you're still not going to be far enough ahead of Mercedes to be able to stop them outdoing you this much in the final sector. And look at how they're doing even compared to McLaren, half a second quicker. And McLaren have got the same power unit. Obviously, McLaren's still learning, I think, how to get the best out of the software and the whole battery management and engine mapping and all of that. But half a second quicker in the final sector is mental. It really is. Half a second quicker as well than Red Bull, who are a lot stronger in the final sector, and that is because on the powertrain side, Red Bull, that is their strongest point, but still not enough to be anywhere near Mercedes or even Ferrari through this part of the lap. And then your Audi looking pretty strong compared to pretty much all the teams except Mercedes and Ferrari to an extent. So Audi, I think it has been, illustrated enough already this season that Audi have got a strong power unit. They just need to massively improve on the aerodynamic side, which they will. by the time we get to, say, the British Grand Prix in July, I think Audi are going to be a lot stronger pace-wise than they are now. Alpine, Haas, Racing Bulls, all pretty much on the same pace. And then again, a big drop off to Williams, who also have not figured out the whole battery stuff, because there's no reason to be 1.1 seconds off the pace for them in the final sector. Absolutely no reason. And then Aston Martin, 1.5 seconds off. And then Cadillac, as I said in my qualifying preview, if they can just figure out a way to deploy that battery better, and deploy it in the right areas, I don't see why Cadillac, at least in qualifying trim, can't be right there, if not quicker, than Aston Martin, because there's no reason for Aston Martin to be quicker in this final part of the lap compared to Cadillac. So yeah, in terms of Mercedes, again, it's that final sector, which again is unfortunate because this is a strong aero type circuit where aerodynamics is important, and we are seeing that to a degree, especially with Red Bull. But in terms of Mercedes being so far ahead, again, at least half the reason is because of the battery and the deployment, and that final sector is obviously where you want to get that battery deployed the most if you have any battery remaining. And Mercedes doing the best job of any team at that, combined with an aero and chassis package, which is maybe not the overall best, but it is good enough, and that's all it needs to be. Lando Norris said it after the first Grand Prix, and a lot of journalists have said it in the paddock, that Ferrari are thought to have the best car in terms of the aero, the chassis side, but that's not what all matters to how overall quick you are. It's a combination of power and grip, and Ferrari don't have the best of both worlds like Mercedes do, and that's why Mercedes are clearly the faster team. But Ferrari, hopefully later, in say 3-4 months time, we hope that they will bring some upgrades and close that gap, not just on the aero side, but not close the gap on the aero side, because they are probably ahead on that side, but continue to improve on that side, but also mostly increase the power and performance generally of the power unit, which is clearly the most important side for that battle towards the front of the field. But we'll have to see with Ferrari, because we've seen it so many times with them not getting the development right over the course of a season, starting off with a good or a decent car and then just falling away as the season progresses. If that happens again, then Mercedes are going to win a lot of races. I still think Red Bull, I know they're so poor this weekend, but I do think Red Bull will improve quite a bit over the course of this season, because I think Red Bull, at least on the engine side, I think are doing a much better job than they are on the aero side. And I think it's easier for them to improve the aero package of their car than it is the engine side. But like I said, on the engine side, I think that side is not as good as Mercedes necessarily, but I think they're doing well still on that side. They just need to bring some upgrades to improve the downforce of the car, and if they do, and it works, Red Bull will get right into the meat of the action. I don't have any doubt about that. And if you are a Red Bull fan, again, this weekend not looking good. This is going to be a real downer of a weekend, but the next race in Suzuka in Japan, Red Bull will be a lot stronger there, so don't worry. Red Bull will be back to much stronger form in a couple weeks' time. But in terms of the pecking order, Mercedes clearly the fastest team by about 0.6, maybe half a second is the closest gap between them and the next best team. But I'd say it's about 0.6 of a second. And then second best team, I think overall I'd probably give it to McLaren because of their pace in the first two sectors. compared to Ferrari. So, yeah, McLaren second, Ferrari third, fourth quickest. It looks like it's between Alpine, Red Bull, and Haas. I think Red Bull will end up as the fourth best team, but not necessarily because they've got the fourth quickest car. So in terms of pace, probably be the Alpine fourth, then the Red Bull, then the Haas, and then Audi seventh, Racing Bulls eighth, Williams ninth, Aston Martin probably 10th, then Cadillac the slowest team. That's what the pecking order should be for qualifying. And based on that, here are my predictions for the session. So Mercedes, yeah, very comfortably will look out the front row with George Russell on pole ahead of Kimi Antonelli. Couple tenths it'll be between those two Mercedes drivers. And then Lando Norris, I'm going in third. Piastri, I think, will just about nick fourth place ahead of the two Ferraris, who will be on the third row, fifth and sixth. Verstappen will be seventh. I think the Red Bull will improve enough to get Max into seventh on the grid. And then I'm going Gasly 8th, Behrman 9th, and Isaac Hadjar in the second Red Bull I don't think will make the top 10. I'm going to go Hülkenberg in the Audi to take the final place in the top 10. So those are my predictions. Let me know, guys, in the live chat, what do you think about the teams going into this session? What are your predictions and just general thoughts going into this session? As we have got just under an hour now to go. There you go, 58 minutes until qualifying begins in Shanghai. Just a quick update. Yeah, no chance of rain. It is sunny and dry. Same conditions exactly as it was yesterday. And it will be the same tomorrow as well. So, yeah, no chance of rain this weekend. Which, yeah, a bit unfortunate because it would definitely spice things up. But that is unfortunately just the way it is. But yeah, let me know in the chat your thoughts ahead of qualifying. And if you want to ask me any questions, then go for it. And I'll get into whatever you guys are saying for the next, say, half an hour or so before we do some other. We'll look at, doing a roundup of the teams before the session begins. What is it? Couple things though before we get into your comments. Firstly, if you haven't already, make sure to smash the like button on this stream. Let's try and get up, as many likes on this stream as we can. So again, if you haven't hit the like button yet, make sure to do so. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And as well, I don't know exactly if it does appear for certain people, but there should be a boost button just below the screen for this stream. If there is, make sure to click that boost button to boost the stream. What that does is it gives the stream more traction on the website. So yeah, make sure to click that boost button if it is there for you. That'd be great if you guys could do that. And of course, continue voting in that poll at the top of the chat to let me know who will end up on pole position out of the two Mercedes drivers, George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. And we'll see you guys vote for on that. The second thing I wanted to just quickly get into was something I did talk about a few hours ago in my qualifying preview. But I'll just quickly, talk about it again. So, what I wanted to discuss was, essentially what the content plan is. Not only for the rest of this month, but mainly until the end of April, because unfortunately, it hasn't been officially confirmed, but it is going to be probably later today or tomorrow. But the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix are going to be cancelled. And of course, they were supposed to take place, those two races, in the middle of April. So we're going to go the whole month of April without an F1 race. And the next race of the calendar, Japan, will be the final race on the calendar for 5 weeks until we get the next one in Miami in early May. And then the next race after that's another 3 weeks. So that's one race. After the Japanese Grand Prix, that's one race in the space of 8 weeks. Not great. But because of all that, I just wanted to let you guys know what the content plan is for the channel. So obviously I'm doing this stream. Tomorrow there will not be a race watch along because I've got important uni work I'm doing at the minute and I just can't afford to do another weekend of, destroying my sleeping pattern to do both streams and all of that. So yeah, that's what I'm doing this weekend. And then Monday there will still be a podcast reviewing the Chinese Grand Prix. So make sure to come along and check that out. Like I said, that will still happen on Monday, probably Monday afternoon or early evening, something like that. And then most likely there will not be another video between once that podcast is uploaded. There won't be another video until we get to the Japanese Grand Prix event, which is obviously at the end of this month. The only way there will be a video between that podcast on Monday and the Japanese Grand Prix is if pretty much Ferrari either win or get close to winning the race on Sunday, which I still don't think is, likely to happen, unfortunately. So yeah, most likely there won't be a video between the two, the podcast and the Japanese Grand Prix. For the Japanese Grand Prix, though, I can announce that I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch along for that event, and I'll be doing a qualifying preview stream on the Friday night. So that'll be 3 streams. Like I said, qualifying preview on Friday night, qualifying watch along on Friday morning, or Saturday morning, sorry, and then on Sunday morning, race watch along. So yeah, make sure to join us for all that content. And then on the Monday, I will be doing well, maybe not the Monday, but either the later on the Sunday or on the Monday. Obviously, I'll do my podcast reviewing that Japanese Grand Prix. But then for April, of course, yeah, there is no F1 races. The plan is I am going to try and upload at least 2 to 3 videos during that month of, where we analyze certain teams and how they've, how they look so far, what issues they've got potentially. Aston Martin obviously is a video we will do. I was always planning on doing that video. It was going to be a video I was going to do at the end of April, but obviously, the 2 races being cancelled changes plans for that in terms of when that video probably comes out. And then, yeah, I'll probably do another video on, Ferrari, Red Bull, the challenges to Mercedes. Might do a video on the regulations, and all of that stuff. We'll see. But yeah, that's the plan for April. So there will be videos in April. Not a lot, but there will be videos on the channel. But unfortunately, because there will be such a long gap without races, obviously the momentum of not just the season, but the channel is going to die a bit. But there's nothing we can do about that. Of course, I did not foresee this happening, and I doubt FOM and Liberty Media did either. So, the original plan was I was going to do probably a video in between Suzuka and Bahrain, then cover the Bahrain and Saudi races, and then do another probably 2 videos between the Saudi and Miami race at the end of April. That was, I think, originally what I was thinking of doing. So, and that would have obviously worked out better, but yeah, it's out of my hands, obviously, in regards to that situation. So yeah, like I said, there will be videos on the channel in April. Not a lot, but there will be something. And then once we get to the Miami Grand Prix, then slowly we can start to build momentum for, the 2026 Formula One season. But I don't think we're really going to start to build that properly until at least the Canadian Grand Prix, which is last week of May, I think, or second to last week of May is that race. So yeah, it's going to take a while for this season to properly get going. I think we will get, some good racing this year. I think we will still get, other teams other than Mercedes winning this year, but it's going to take time for that to happen. Um, I don't think there's any doubt about that it will take some time. So, yeah, we'll see, how things go in regards to the Formula One season. But yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know of the channel plans. So, there is still plenty of content coming up, for this month. And like I said, there'll be plenty of content we'll be doing for the Japanese Grand Prix, which I'm looking forward to, as I always look forward to, that race at Suzuka. And then, yeah, month of April, unfortunately, it'll be, no F1 races in that month. The last time we had no F1 races in the month of April was of course, for the pandemic. And that was the last time we had such a long break between races as well, was because of the pandemic. Um, or it wasn't really a long break between races, but a long break between like a session and when the season was supposed to start. So yeah, but because of world events, that's unfortunately what's going on, and there's nothing that can be done about it. Obviously, in terms of the other Middle East races at the end of the season, who knows what's going to happen with them? Depends on what happens in the Middle East between now and say September, October. I don't think you're going to get a decision on whether the Qatar or Abu Dhabi races go ahead until at least September, and probably at the latest, say middle of October. Um, for those particular Grand Prix, so we could have a scenario where the Las Vegas Grand Prix is the final race on the calendar, which would be, I think, 2 weeks earlier the season would finish than planned. Final race in Las Vegas. I mean, let's be honest, that's what FOM and Liberty Media want. The only reason that isn't the case is because Abu Dhabi has, the contract in place and has had for a while that they get the final race of the season. But, when that contract comes up for renewal or comes to an end, whatever the case, I have no doubt that Las Vegas will be the final race on the calendar in a few years. No doubt about it. So yeah, I'm sure Liberty secretly are absolutely loving the idea of that possibly happening at the end of this season. But whether it'll be a championship decider we get in Vegas, I mean, at the minute it doesn't look very likely, does it? But who knows? What will happen development wise over the course of this season. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to just quickly get into, just let you guys know about. But yeah, we'll get into your comments in just a moment. Let me just quickly get up and do something a sec. Then I'll just get back in my chair. So yeah, let's just have a quick read of some of your comments for the next 15-20 minutes or so. And hello to all of you. Hope you're all doing well. Hello to Astro, who says, what I think will happen and what I want to happen are usually different things. Hoping Piastri somehow manages to get pole and win, but sure ain't looking terribly likely, no. I'm not going to say absolutely no chance, because you just never know, but it's as small of a chance as really possible that Piastri's going to get pole like he did last year. And Astro saying, agree, 10-second penalty was far too harsh. First lap racing incident, I'd say, reckon a bit more leeway given. Tricky cars and first lap should be given. Yeah, I agree. And, he was at fault for the incident. He did clearly go wide and push Hadjar off the track, but 10 seconds is extreme, I think, in that case. I think 5 seconds would have done for that one. And I know the argument may be, well, he, has destroyed Hajar's race, but you can't punish drivers based on the result of, what happened to the other driver. If it does happen to destroy another driver's race, that's obviously not great, but you need to punish it on the incident alone. And it does feel like that penalty and those types of penalties, it feels like it's more for, how it affected the victim rather than the incident itself. Astra says, I reckon Oscar will beat Norris, out qualified him in Melbourne. And then Astra gives his prediction, which is quite mental, I would say, but you never know. Could happen. He goes pole for Antonelli, Hamilton second, Piastri third, Leclerc fourth, Norris fifth, Hadjar sixth, and then Behrman, Ocon, Hulkenberg, and Bortoletto. So no Russell or Verstappen in your top 10. That would be quite mental. Paulie says, do you think that this 4-week break will assist a number of teams to be able to bridge the gap to Mercedes? I mean, that is one plus, that, teams will get more time back at the factory and, in the wind tunnel to work on their weaknesses. I think it will benefit Aston Martin and Honda the most because, less time to be embarrassed and more time to work and improve. It does appear that Honda, of course, the next race is Honda's home race in Japan. Apparently, Honda are bringing some parts which will hopefully reduce the vibration and they hope improve performance and just improve the overall situation. The new power unit for Honda, though, is not coming until the Canadian Grand Prix, which is on May the 20... When is it? Is it 22nd or 23rd? I think the Canadian Grand Prix is. So, Aston Martin's season doesn't really start until then, to be honest. And you would hope that Honda engine will be a lot better than this one. At least performance terms. If they still not that reliable, obviously that's not a great thing, but I think at least that would be encouraging for the team if there was a lot more performance potential there in that new power unit. But, we'll have to see. But one thing I am hoping is that, from a Ferrari and Red Bull perspective, that they will be able to use that time well in figuring out, right, this is where we need to improve, and getting in the wind tunnel and figuring out, right, these are the parts we need to bring, and hopefully these parts will give us an extra, 3-4 tenths of a second and close that gap. Mercedes, of course, they'll be looking to maintain their advantage. Remember, Red Bull do have, compared to Mercedes, an extra 5% of wind tunnel time between now and the end of June. So Red Bull, they're not going to make a massive difference development-wise, probably in the first half of the season. I think second half of the season, though, they will start to make a bit more of a difference. Because in the championship, they'll be further behind in positions. And they'll have a bit extra wind tunnel time for the second half of the season than they do for the first half compared to Mercedes. Ferrari, though, have an extra 10% wind tunnel time compared to Mercedes. So in terms of development potential, Ferrari have got, the most out of the 3 front-running teams behind Mercedes. Unfortunately for McLaren, as a result of winning last year's Constructors' Championship, they have the least amount of wind tunnel time. So McLaren, unless they can really work their wonders in the wind tunnel and, with their developments, which we've seen before with them, but obviously they had the advantage back then of having a lot more time in the wind tunnel than others. They're going to struggle to really close that gap to Mercedes until, I mean, they might not really close the gap at all over the course of the season. Mercedes have, I think, 5% more wind tunnel time than McLaren until the end of June. So, yeah, McLaren, if you told me McLaren will not gain any lap time on Mercedes through the whole season, I wouldn't be surprised by that. I think McLaren are a lot more likely to gain on Mercedes probably next season, which I know sounds depressing if you're a McLaren fan, that, that's pretty much me already writing off this season. But because you won the Constructors' Championship last year, unless you can bring some big, upgrades that are going to transform your season, that's just the way it's going to be. So, yeah, Ferrari and Red Bull are the teams you've got to look at as the only two teams I think that can close the gap to Mercedes. I still think Red Bull are most likely to close the gap because Red Bull have proven, development-wise, to be really good at improving their car over the course of a season. They've been able to do that year in and year out. I think, though, one team to keep certainly an eye on in terms of not just the first half of the season, but really the season overall in terms of wind tunnel time and development is Audi. Audi have, because they finished 9th in the championship last year, they have got the third most wind tunnel time of anyone until the end of June, and then they'll probably have still quite a bit more wind tunnel time compared to the front running teams for the second half of the season. So they are the team to look out for this season in terms of development and upgrades. And to a degree, Aston Martin, because they did also finish not that high in the championship last year. Aston Martin were only 7th in the end. So, we have to keep an eye on Aston Martin. But Audi, for me, because they've already got a good base, that's the team I'm looking out for. I think if they really get their development right, I think we could see them really dominate that midfield race and maybe even bridge the gap to the front runners at certain races if they really get it right, like, say, McLaren did a couple years ago when they were a midfield team and then, transformed themselves into a front runner. So keep your eye out for Audi. I think this break really will be good for them as well. So do not count them out. I think they are really big dark horses. Astra asking or suggesting a video on how the rules and new cars are working so far and what can be done to improve them, please. And he says, "Oh fuck Abu Dhabi too, good riddance if so." Yeah, I might do a video on the regulations and where, or why fans are complaining. I think, that is likely a video I will do. Don't know when I'll upload it, but yeah, I probably will do a video like that. Probably, I don't know, a week or so after the Japanese Grand Prix. Because there are parts of the regulations that we like. The aero side, I think people do like. The cars look a lot better. They're lighter. They're more nimble. Those are good things. It's the power unit side, which is just not... It's not it. Drew Blank Music says, after a 5-week break, if Newey doesn't show up with a race car, his reputation is toast. They need to show up. After that 5-week break, they definitely need to show up a lot more with it. But I still think they're going to be towards the back until at least, like I said, that Canadian Grand Prix where the new power unit is coming. Drew saying, on the money, Audi is the sleeper. Yeah, I think Audi have really gone under the radar. They've started well. They've got definitely one of the top 2-3 best midfield cars. And because of the extra and quite a bit extra money and resources they have compared to a lot of the midfield teams. If they do get their development right, they are going to very quickly find themselves at the front of that midfield and then pretty comfortably be finishing, I think, fifth in the championship. So, and obviously that was my prediction coming into this season. I thought Audi would finish in fifth because of the development. And yeah, I do believe that, especially once we get into the European season, I think you'll really start to see Audi really move on and kick on this season. And I am really excited, I must say, about Audi's potential and their future. Because thankfully, they've started off with a good base. And as I said, with Audi, I think before, and I've said it with other teams, it's harder, I think, with these regulations to get the power unit right in terms of making sure it has enough performance. But Audi, it looks like they've got that area right. Not as right as Mercedes, but it's not a weakness. You know, it's not a weak power unit, put it that way. It's just, you know, because obviously they've only just took over what was the Sauber team, they're obviously going to still have, you know, midfield level aerodynamics and chassis. But once they properly, you know, get developing, then I think they're very quickly going to improve. And because they've got a good base with the engine side, which you'd hope obviously they'll improve that over time and get even stronger, if you know they can improve the aero side, which I think it's easier to improve the aerodynamics of these cars than it is the engine side. I think on the engine side, if it's not a strong enough power unit, no matter what you do, it just will never be good enough because the lack of power will always let you down. But I don't think that's going to be something that is the case with Audi. So yeah, definitely watch out for them. Not just this season, but the next few years, because I think they're going to be a real dark horse in Formula One. Astro says Haas is a bit of a sleeper in the midfield too. True. Haas, they were 8th in the championship last year. They've got quite a bit of wind tunnel time as well. And at the minute, Haas do have the probably the fastest, at least in race trim, it does appear they've probably got most of the time the fastest midfield car. So, that is a good thing there for Haas. But again, because Audi have just got so much more money, resources, and I know it doesn't matter as much having so much money compared to other teams as as it used to because of the budget cap and all of that. But just the um the potential, obviously, that Audi have got is just way more than Haas, and that's why I think they will beat them hand over fist in the development race. Another team, though, we have to mention, obviously, is Alpine. I know they weren't great in Melbourne. They've looked a lot better here. Alpine have the second most wind tunnel time for the first half of this season. So, yeah, keep your eye on Alpine as well. Because if they get the development right, they could have a really strong car second half of the season. Paulie says, my concern with the racing is after Melbourne, the early part of the race was watchable but did not look like skill, but the end of the race, last lap's nothing. Seemed to happen, so races may go stale. That was my problem with, what happened in Melbourne is, yeah, there was lots of overtaking, but was it down to teams or certain cars genuinely being quicker? Was it down to driver's skill? It didn't feel like it. It was just battery games. One car would run out the battery and the other wouldn't, vice versa. It was very Mario Kart like. I know people have made jokes about it because Leclerc said he felt like a mushroom in Mario Kart, but it was true. Even at the time, it just felt very fake, very silly, very, again, Mario Kart, and that's not what we want. It, I think the best way to describe it, and I'll mention the best way to describe it in just a moment because I just want to post a link of the stream out one final time. As we're only half an hour away, by the way, from qualifying. Come join us here to watch along qualifying in China. There you go. And hopefully we get some more people jumping on soon. It obviously last year and all the years before we had DRS. It felt like ultra powerful and way too easy DRS. That's what it felt like. Like, imagine last year if we had two DRS zones very close to each other and the DRS was really powerful, where one car would overtake the other and then the other car would just re-overtake straight away because of just how powerful the DRS was. We would be also saying then how artificial and dumb it is. And that's how it felt in Melbourne. It felt like extremely powerful DRS and just button pressing. And again, I think that's pretty much what we had in Melbourne. And that's why a lot of people didn't like it. I know there were certain people that did, like it, and that's great. If you enjoyed it, that's great. But most Formula One fans started watching Formula One for, for reasons that we did not see in that race. Yeah, we've had DRS for years, but a lot of the time the DRS was not powerful enough to the point where you would get, silly stuff like that. And extreme closing speeds and all of that rubbish. And that's the problem. It's just it just feels like when someone runs out the battery and someone still has battery left and they press overtake mode, it feels like DRS on steroids, and that's not what we want. That's just not what we want at all. And that will ruin the racing, quite frankly. So they've got to make improvements to these power units if they can with the regulations. So that isn't as much of a thing. People or the drivers pressing the overtake mode to use more of their battery to overtake. I'm not against that idea, but not when it's so easy to run out of the battery for the other driver, even when they're not using overtake mode. I think that was the problem. And again, some of the closing speeds you saw in that race were mental, absolutely mental. I think, sorry, I think that's a big reason why Russell locked up in turn one when he passed Leclerc briefly on one of the laps in those early races, was because he just closed in so quickly on him and he wasn't expecting it. And it all just happened so quickly. And I do think with these closing speeds, I'm not, I don't want to say this, but it does feel like it's going to lead to a very big, scary accident. Because there's going to be a time where a driver's not paying attention and just goes right over the rear wing of another car, and who knows how that could end up. Hello to Brabham. Good to see you. Let me see if I can find some other comments here, and then I will. What do you call it? I will quickly just touch on the teams. Just do a quick roundup of where I think they'll all be for for qualifying. And Drew Blank Music earlier said, if we push the boost button, you will run out of battery charge. Again, I think they've just run out too quickly of that battery. I think that's what they should do is they should make it like what we had with Kurz, where the battery only drains if you press, say, overtake mode. So obviously you're only going to press it down the proper acceleration zones, like the pit straight or the back straight, maybe the straight just before the final corner. That's the only areas where you're going to press that button to get that extra bit of, straight line performance. The problem with these batteries is they drain as soon as basically you put the throttle on. That's why they run out so quickly, because they're not allowing the teams to, I think, generate or harvest as much energy as they probably could. They're not allowed, for example, the teams to regenerate energy with the front axle, which is a problem. But yeah, if it was like Kurz, where they could just press the button and drain the battery where they wanted, and then once it was gone, that would, at least it would come down to the driver, and they wouldn't have to lift and coast because of a preset battery system. They would be able to push flat out and then decide, right, I've got this amount of seconds of battery I can deploy. I'm going to deploy it here. Just like it was with Kurz, where you had, I can't remember how many seconds of Kurz. It was like 10, was it 10 seconds or 8 seconds of Kurz battery that you could deploy over the lap. And then, if you decided to use it all at the start of the lap, then at least you knew, right, I'm not going to have anything for the rest of the lap. Obviously, you're not going to do that here, because obviously that long back straight, it would cost you massively. But again, at least it would come down to the driver, and the driver wouldn't have to lift and coast to save battery. They would just use it where it really needs to be used, and then where it doesn't need to be used, they can just concentrate on driving the car. That's what it should be. Drew says, I meant your channel boost button, stay in charge. Yeah, I didn't know that, but cheers anyway. But yeah, I think you guys get the point that I'm trying to make. Regarding the whole, the batteries and the boost and all of that. Again, if it was like Kurz, which it was driver dependent, and it was, down to just when the drivers decided to use it, it would work out a lot better. Because then, if the driver ran out of battery, you could then at least say, well, the driver, used too much of it in this part of the lap, therefore that's why he's, losing straight line speed at this point. Like it would basically act, if it worked that way, it would act as a much stronger Kurz system. But at least it would be, again, driver dependent, and it would be, the drivers, down to the drivers, not preset systems and engine mapping and all this rubbish that we don't care about and want to hear about. Anyway, let's do a quick roundup of the teams and how I think they're all going to do in qualifying. Anyway, yeah, Mercedes, they're going to lock out the front row. The only real question is who will be on pole position. It looks like it'll be George Russell. He's looked comfortably the quickest Mercedes driver by 2 to even 3/10 of a second. Mercedes were the only team in sprint qualifying to get into the 131s. They will be probably doing a low 131 at least, maybe even a 130 lap time, which would be, I've got to say, quite incredible if they did that. Remember, pole position at this track last year was a 130.6, and Russell in sprint qualifying did a 131.5, so we're still not that far away from pole position last year in cars that are supposed to be, 1.5, 2 seconds off the pace. I mean, in Melbourne, they were 3 seconds off. So, well, 3.5 seconds off. So, yeah, around this track, they are really looking strong. Yeah, Mercedes, front row, lockout, surely they will get that. It'd be a shock if they do not. For Ferrari, if they're going to give themselves a chance of fighting Mercedes in any aspect in the race, then third on the grid is something they need to get. It is not as easy here to get into the lead from, say, fourth or fifth on the grid as it is in Melbourne, because the track is a bit narrower and the run to the first corner, I think, is slightly shorter than it is in Melbourne. So if they can get third on the grid, that gives them a properly good chance of getting into the lead in the race and having a fight. But McLaren, I think, might upset them today. Again, I believe McLaren in quali trim have got the faster car, but Ferrari are still close enough to get ahead of McLaren. It all comes down to just how the drivers perform. In Q3, for Red Bull, their aim is going to be to try and be best of the rest. I think if Max can get 7th on the grid, I think he'll be at least satisfied with that, because there's no better they can do than 7th on the grid. If they can get both cars as well into Q3, that would be pretty good considering how slow they are. They're nowhere near the front 3 teams, and this weekend is just damage limitation. For McLaren, again, good quali car, not the best race car, not a race car that really can contend, I think, for a podium, but at least in qualifying, they could absolutely end up on the second row of the grid and third on the grid. I do think in the first couple sectors they've got the better car compared to Ferrari. It's just, can they be quick enough in the final sector as well to get the job done? That is going to be an important factor for McLaren. It was in sprint qualifying, and we'll see what they can do here. But yeah, McLaren, again, in quali trim compared to Ferrari, they've got a fast car, but it will be a close battle that McLaren, I think, will just about win. Now into the midfield, Audi, I think, will get a car into the top 10. They are very close looking with other teams like Haas and Racing Bulls and Alpine. Other midfield teams into getting a car, maybe even a couple cars into the top 10. I think Audi will, because Nico Hülkenberg, I think, is driving well enough to get himself into the top 10. And with Red Bull having their struggles, I just don't see Red Bull getting both cars into Q3. So Audi, I think, will get a car, and it will be Nico Hülkenberg getting into Q3. Haas looking good. Oliver Behrman has looked great all weekend. 8th in the sprint, 9th in sprint qualifying. He's very confident. Obviously, he's been carrying this confidence for months now, and I just don't see any reason why he would not be in Q3, given his performance level and how good the Haas car looks as well. So yeah, Behrman, I think, will be in the top 10. Esteban Ocon, keep your eyes out for him. Remember, he was very good at this Grand Prix last year and was close to getting into the top 10 in sprint qualifying. Racing Bulls, of course, scored a couple points in the sprint. Good to see Liam Lawson getting a couple points there. Pace-wise, though, they just don't look anywhere near the same level as they were in Melbourne, and that's because I think it's pretty clear to see with this car where their strengths and weaknesses lie. At circuits with more straights, they will be stronger because of the strong Red Bull powertrain engine. The more corners, though, the tighter and twistier the circuit, they are going to be a bit further off the pace. They just don't have as much downforce. I think it's the Haas or the Audi and Alpine, even when they maximize their car, look stronger with the amount of grip that they have. So, yeah, both cars most likely will get knocked out in Q2, but we'll keep our eyes on them. They're still close enough that maybe, if they really pull out a strong lap, one of the drivers, maybe they can get into Q3. For Alpine, watch out for Pierre Gasly. Very strong he was in sprint qualifying. 7th on the grid and ahead of Max Verstappen he was by 0.4 of a second, so watch out for him. Franco Colapinto has got to do a better job in the second Alpine, and hopefully he will. But yeah, Gasly is definitely one of the drivers to watch out for, and Alpine, one of the cars to watch out for. Williams look absolutely terrible unless we have a couple teams having reliability issues ahead of them, or a couple drivers having accidents. Both Williamses really should be knocked out in Q1. Their car is very slow. Same for Aston Martin, who look closer to the front than they did a week ago, but still have lots of issues, which we all know about. And Cadillac, obviously, the slowest team. And here's a quick reminder of my top 10 prediction for qualifying. Russell, I think, will take pole, from Antonelli second, and then Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen, Gasly, Behrman, and Hulkenberg, I think, will be your top 10. As we have got just over, or just under, rather, 15 minutes to go until qualifying begins in Shanghai. And we'll see who ends up on pole for the Chinese Grand Prix. Pole position has been, in the last 10 years, it's been mostly successful at this circuit of getting the race win. And if you go back to the end of the V8 days, Nico Rosberg took his first win in Formula One here in Shanghai by starting on pole. Lewis Hamilton won here in 2014 and 2015 from pole. Rosberg won again here in 2016 from pole. Hamilton again in 2017 won from pole. 2018 was obviously a bit of a mental race. Ricciardo winning from 6th on the grid. 2019, Hamilton won from 2nd on the grid. And then last year, Piastri won from pole. Verstappen in 2024 as well won from pole. So most of the time, if you get pole at this track, you will win the race, unless it's a bit of a crazy race for whatever reason, wet weather, or a well-timed safety car for other drivers to shake things up, like what happened in 2018. Other than that, those type of scenarios, pole position normally is the victor. And if George Russell does get pole, then realistically, who is going to stop them? Looney Classic says, I do not have any hope of anyone catching Mercedes this year or next. Well, I think you should calm down. It's not that bad. It's, this is not Mercedes 2014/15. It's not. Mercedes are not as dominant as they were then. They've got clearly the best car, but it's not by as much as that era. It really isn't. And again, I do believe Red Bull will close the gap over the season, and I think we will get Red Bull winning some races. Ferrari, I do believe they've got a good enough car to win a couple races at least this season. I don't think Mercedes are going to win every race this year. I don't think that's going to be the case. Yeah, early on, Mercedes are probably going to dominate a bit, but as the season goes on, it will get a bit more competitive. I don't have any real doubt about that. as we've got, 10 more minutes until the session begins at a glorious Shanghai circuit. The sun has been out all, since Friday, and it's going to be out all day today and for tomorrow as well. And it's a comfortable, sunny weekend. It's not, overly hot. It's 17, 18 degrees Celsius. So, for you Americans, just under 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, very comfortable. As they're doing quite a bit of work there to the Red Bull. There's Max Verstappen stood watching his car. Let me just have a look to see. And let me just get rid of this guy spamming in the chat. Let me just have a look to see if there's a problem with the Red Bull, because that Red Bull does not look like it's going to be ready necessarily to get out there straight away. Let me just see if there's an issue with Max's car. Just looking on Twitter currently. Can't see anything. So we'll see when we get to the session. Mercedes are dominant period. Nobody but you, Chazza, is talking about 2014. But keep up with the delusion that anyone will realistically catch Mercedes this year. To be fair, Looney, you are always very pessimistic. I mean, last year, I remember you saying many times that no one was going to stop McLaren, and they nearly lost the Drivers' Championship, so I think you will be wrong. I'm not saying you'll be wrong that, Mercedes are going to win a lot of races and probably will win the championships. I don't think that's wrong, but I don't think Mercedes are going to win practically almost every race. I don't, this is not going to be a 2023 level season. It's not. That Mercedes car, it is beatable. The other teams have just got to improve their engines and figure out, how to best deploy their batteries and all that rubbish. And once they do, I think they'll be, be able to fight them, because that's really the difference between Mercedes and Ferrari, let's say, is Mercedes have got the stronger engine in terms of performance, and obviously, are much better at deploying the battery. In terms of cornering performance, the Ferrari is on the same level at least as Mercedes, and even probably the McLaren is on the same level. So, if you go back to 2023 with Red Bull, the Red Bull was better at everything, and clearly better at everything. They had the best straight line speed. They, by far, had the best cornering performance. They had no tyre wear. It's not the same situation as Red Bull. It really isn't. So, again, they've got a very good car, no doubt about it. They will win a lot of races. I think they will win both championships, but I don't think it's going to be a complete cakewalk of a season. I don't believe that. But, I'm prepared to be proven wrong, and we'll see. We'll see this season, what happens. But I think once we get into the season properly, into the summer, especially the second half of the season after the summer break, I think we will start to see other teams challenge Mercedes and other teams, beat them, in certain races. But whether those other teams can properly fight them for the championship, again, completely different that's a completely different talking point. But yeah, I definitely believe. Looney Classic says, I agree that some teams will win here and there, but we want a championship battle. Yeah, I agree. I still think we will get one for the Drivers' Championship. I still believe Red Bull will improve this season, and I think Red Bull will be, a lot more in there towards the end of the season. But again, we'll have to just wait and see how that goes with Red Bull and how they improve, when they improve, and we'll have to see if Ferrari are able to develop well, which we hope they can, but we don't trust them to necessarily because they've just disappointed us in that area for so long. But yeah, let's I think, let's see where we're at by, say, the Spanish Grand Prix, which is what, be the 7th race of the season. I think by then, if none of the teams are any closer by then to Mercedes compared to now, then yeah, I probably would agree with you at that point that Mercedes are going to absolutely walk away with, the championships and be winning almost every race. But let's wait until then. And then, yeah, by then, hopefully at least one of the, say, Ferrari or Red Bull will be, 3-4 tenths closer or something like that. Anyway, we are only 3 minutes away from qualifying beginning, so let's go through just a couple things before we get into the session, and those are the championship standings before this session. So we've had the sprint, and George Russell in the lead of the championship. Of course, he won the race in Melbourne, and then he won the sprint race, so he is in the lead. Already 11 points clear of his teammate Kimi Antonelli. Leclerc third, level on points with Antonelli. Hamilton fourth, only 4 points behind. Norris in fifth, Verstappen sixth, Behrman seventh, Lindblad eighth, Piastri into the top 10 now after finishing sixth in the sprint. He's in ninth, and Gabriel Bortoleto in 10th. On the constructors' side, Mercedes in the lead, only 15 points clear though, Ferrari, who had a strong sprint. McLaren already quite far behind after just one race and one sprint in third. They are almost 40 points behind. Red Bull in fourth, only a point clear of Haas in fifth, who are only a point clear of Racing Bull sixth. Audi 7th, Alpine 8th, Williams 9th, Cadillac 10th, and Aston Martin still rooted to the bottom of the championship. And here we are for qualifying. And of course, Q1 will be a 18-minute long session. And remember, we'll be knocking out the 6 slowest in this session. So from 17th down to 21st, or 22nd, sorry, will be the positions knocked out in this session, as we've already got a queue at the end of the pit lane. One thing they did show, though, quickly on the F1 intro, was the tyre graphic. As what is the Cadillac doing there at the end of the pit lane? He's tried to pull out, and he's now basically blocking the pit exit. They need to reverse that or push that Cadillac back, because that looks like it's going to block the way for everyone. Well, the session starts in just over 30 seconds, so we'll see what happens there. But I don't know what Cadillac it is. Yeah, what do you call it? In terms of the tyres, the medium tyre is only a couple tenths a lap slower than the soft. So I think the front running teams we may see, and yeah, there is a car I can see waiting in the pit lane. It's an Audi of, I think, Nico Hulkenberg on the medium. And the session is now underway. The Cadillac does get out of the pit lane and manages not to collide with the wall or anything. So qualifying has begun in China. But yeah, the medium is only a couple tenths of lap slower. So, to save tyres potentially for Q3, that might be an option. But Ferrari are not doing that, at least for the moment. Leclerc in the pit lane in the queue is on the soft compound tyre. His teammate Lewis Hamilton behind. Looks like he's on the soft tyre as well. Lewis Hamilton, of course, the greatest driver of all time around this circuit. Hamilton, for a long time, dominating qualifying at this Grand Prix. And it is, Valtteri Bottas, the first car on track. And Valtteri took pole position here in 2019. It was a brilliant pole position as well, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who was at pretty much the peak of his powers. Bottas, I still think, very underrated his time at Mercedes, given just how great Hamilton was in that period. As Bottas is warming up his tyres down the back straight. As he comes now into the hairpin. Cadillac, are going to get knocked out in Q1, but let's see how they do, at least compared to Aston Martin. As he opens the rear wing and obviously flexes the front wing to maximize straight line performance, as an Alpine comes out of the pit lane and kind of gets in the way of the Cadillac, not massively, but that will have distracted Bottas to a degree. As the Finn comes into the first sector, we're not seeing any sector time data, unfortunately, for him at the minute. As that Audi that came out on the mediums was Bortoletto, because Hulkenberg is still in the pits. Actually, Bortoletto is as well. So both Audis still in the pits, which is weird. Perez is still in the pits, and both Mercedes cars in the pits. Mercedes have got that luxury. They don't need to get out there and be getting straight on with it, because, I mean, they just need to get out there and just bang in one lap time, really, and they're through. As Arvid Lindblad has a bit of a moment on the exit of turn 2. As, he goes deep at turn 6, and that is the lap blown. Just went too deep on the brakes. As we're now looking at Max Verstappen on the medium compound tyre. Have they fixed this Red Bull enough that it can be at least ahead of the midfield cars? He takes a very wide turn in for the second corner, and not the greatest exit from turn 3, but he's got through there nonetheless. As Franco Colapinto goes fastest. Don't know what the lap time is. As I'm trying to get Bottas up the order, but for some reason my graphics are not playing ball for whatever reason. Don't quite understand why. As Lance Stroll is up to third. Or let me just put him up second quickly. And for some reason, Bottas, his name won't go above 20th. Except when I do this and move Ocon up as well. Don't quite know why that is, but Isaac Hadjar goes quickest on a 134.5. Max Verstappen, though, goes slightly quicker on a 134.4. So the Red Bull's pretty much on the same pace. As Charles Leclerc goes second, just about splitting the two Red Bulls. Two Red Bulls on the mediums, Ferraris on the soft. Well, Leclerc on the soft, Hamilton actually on the medium, goes fifth. Liam Lawson is up to fourth place. Well, not anymore, because Pierre Gasly goes second for Alpine, ahead of Leclerc, and then it's Hadjar fourth, Lawson fifth, and then Behrman in sixth place. If I can get my graphic to bloody work. Yeah, Behrman, well, was in sixth. Now it's Oscar Piastri quickest. And again, if I can get my graphic to work. Oscar Piastri in currently in P1. And then Nico Hulkenberg goes second for Audi. So let me just update that. Hulkenberg up to second. Bortoletto is third in the second Audi car. There you go. And then Verstappen, no longer in fourth place. It's Lando Norris. So Norris in fourth, and then Verstappen, Gasly, Leclerc in seventh, Hadjar eighth, Lawson ninth, Behrman 10th. So that's your top 10. And then Ocon is 11th, with Lindblad in 12th, Carlos Sainz 13th, and then Albon 14th, Lewis Hamilton 15th. Hamilton has only done a lap on the medium, so Colapinto 16th, and then in the drop zone, it is Alonso 17th, Bottas 18th, Stroll 19th, and Sergio Perez is in 20th. The two Mercedes, obviously at the back, they haven't done a lap yet, but they are both on out laps. Good to see Bottas, though, ahead of Lance Stroll. Even though, yeah, Stroll probably hasn't done a proper lap yet. At least he's ahead for the moment, as we've got just under 10 minutes to go. As here is Antonelli, who swings it right back in and gets a decent exit. As Isaac Hadjar goes up to fourth. Hadjar 134.3 on the medium, which is, well, compared to what Piastri's done, it's not too bad. But I mean, these lap times are way slower than what we saw in qualifying, sprint qualifying, as Russell has done a purple first sector. Remember, the pole position for sprint qualifying was 131.5. I'm expecting them to be in the low 131s for pole position. So we are still, what, at least 2.5 seconds away from what pole position should be. So these lap times are still pretty slow. As both Mercedes absolutely miles quicker than anybody else, really. As Franco Colapinto has gone up to fourth place. As Antonelli goes quickest on a 133.3, still quite a bit slower than what Mercedes did in sprint qualifying, but obviously this is only Q1. Mercedes are saving so much on what they could actually do. As Russell goes half a tenth quicker, 133.2. So Russell is quickest, and then Antonelli is in second as Fernando Alonso improves up to 17th and goes ahead of one of the Williams cars of Alex Albon. So yeah, Antonelli in second, and then it's Piastri, Hulkenberg, Bortoleto, Colapinto, Hadjar, Norris, Verstappen, and Gasly. And then Leclerc, Lawson, Behrman, Ocon, Lindblad, Sainz, Alonso is up to 17th, Albon in 18th, Hamilton 19th, and then Stroll, Bottas, Perez. Hamilton, though, who was just grabbing some extra slipstream there down the back straight from the Racing Bulls, he's on a much better lap and he's on the soft tyre now, so this is going to put Hamilton surely comfortably into Q2 as Albon does a lap that gets him just out of the drop zone into 16th. But he's about to be put back in as Lewis Hamilton goes third, only a quarter of a second slower than Mercedes. So there you go. Hamilton up to third. So the drop zone now is Albon, Sainz, Alonso, Stroll, Bottas, Perez. That's exactly what we expect it to be. Those are clearly the three slowest teams as Bottas gets himself ahead of Lance Stroll up to 20th, and Bottas only about 4.5 tenths slower than Alonso. And Bottas is about second away from making Q2, which is obviously still quite a bit of lap time. Liam Lawson has just improved. He's gone up to 6th. As Norris did not have the most comfortable trip there through the penultimate corner before the back straight. But Norris is improving on this lap. Pierre Gasly improves up to 4th. Alpine, I think, pretty comfortably are going to make Q2 with both cars. As Lando Norris exits the final corner and he goes up to 4th, about just under 3 tenths slower than Russell up front. Here comes Charles Leclerc, who goes quickest by nearly a full tenth. To a 133.1. Again, though, these are way slower lap times than what we saw in sprint qualifying. So Mercedes, no doubt, have got way more pace in the bag. As here comes Piastri. To the line. Improves only by 1 position, up to 6th. As the two Haas's are on a lap, they need to get some better laps in. They're currently 14th and 15th. As Ocon brakes hard for the hairpin. Looks good through there. And now Ocon through the final corner. To the line. And he goes up to 8th. Where does his teammate Behrman go? Just a few seconds behind. He goes 7th. So 7th and 9th. As, let me just put Ocon up there. There you go. So then it's Hulkenberg 10th, then Lawson, Bortoleto, Colapinto, Hadjar, and Verstappen 14th and 15th. They did those laps on the mediums. They're now on their out laps on soft tyres, so Red Bull will be fine. And then it's Lindblad 16th. And then, yeah, the drop zone is still Albon, Sainz, Alonso, Bottas, Stroll, and Perez. And again, it should remain that way because those are clearly the 3 slowest cars. So unfortunately, Q1 is not going to be the most exciting unless a driver out there messes up, which can happen. We've seen it plenty of times. As the top 5 now pit and surely will not be coming out again because they don't need to. They're comfortably into Q2. The only drivers really that need to get in better laps are the 2 Red Bulls and then Colapinto and Lindblad. I think anyone from Bortoleto in 12th and up is comfortably safe. As we look at the 2 Red Bulls warming up their soft compound tyres. At least Red Bull have saved a set of tyres for Q3 if they make it there. They should do, at least with Max Verstappen. As Alex Albon in 17th, the highest placed driver in the drop zone, has started his final lap. I'll let you know how he gets on. As the 2 Red Bulls start their final lap of Q1, let's see where Red Bull will go. Surely they can improve comfortably and at least get both cars into the top 10 here in Q1. As they take again that wide turn in that pretty much everyone is doing. Not the greatest run there through turn 3. Bit of understeer, but they get through as first sector is good, but yeah. No grip for Max at turn 6. Understeering a lot on that front end of that Red Bull. We saw it in Bahrain in testing. The front end of this Red Bull just is nowhere near strong enough. As Carlos Sainz does a very strong first sector. Verstappen 3.5 tenths off Leclerc for the first 2 sectors, which is not bad, given how Red Bull have looked this weekend. As Alex Albon gets out of the drop zone to 16th. And is about a quarter of a second ahead of Lindblad. Lindblad, though, is still on his final lap, so Albon could still be eliminated. Sainz also is on his final lap. Carlos Sainz is going quicker than Albon. So Williams, the 2 drivers are trying their best, but I'm still not sure they're actually going to get through. Isaac Hadjar goes up to 7th. As Max Verstappen goes 4th. As here comes Carlos Sainz, who goes 14th. That's a very good lap from Carlos Sainz. And that pushes Albon out in Q1. Can Lindblad get his way through? As the checkered flag has fallen, these are your final laps. Arvid Lindblad up to 11th place. As Lance Stroll only 21st. So Stroll has been out-qualified by a Cadillac. As Colapinto goes 9th. Bortoleto improves and goes up to 7th place. As here comes Valtteri Bottas, who's at least qualified or out-qualified one of the Aston Martins. And finishes up in 20th place. They should be very happy with that. That's a great result for Cadillac. And only a couple tenths off Alonso, who ended up 19th. So there you go. Both Williamses in the end were knocked out. So let me just update as well that Max Verstappen ended up all the way in 4th place. And just update a couple other positions as well. Bortoleto, yeah, was in 7th. And hold on, Norris was in 6th. Then, yeah, Bortoleto 7th. And then Piastri, Hadjar, Colapinto, and then Behrman, Gasly, then Ocon, then Lindblad, Hulkenberg, and Lawson. So, yeah, the drivers on their way to Q2, Leclerc, Russell, Antonelli, Verstappen, Hamilton, Norris, Bortoletto, Piastri, Hadjar, Colapinto, Behrman, Gasly, Ocon, Lindblad, Hulkenberg, and Lawson. And as expected, the drivers knocked out in Q1, Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, Fernando Alonso, Valtteri Bottas, Lance Stroll, and Sergio Perez. But like I said, that's good for Cadillac. You know, properly fighting Aston Martin there and splitting them. And, well, looking even more competitive here than they were in Melbourne compared to Aston Martin. So, yeah, that's really, really positive to see from the Cadillac team. And hopefully they have a decent race tomorrow and at least get to the finish with one of their cars. Astro saying in the chat, said it before, we'll say it again, Stroll really needs to just go play tennis or something else with his life. Yeah. I mean, it's not really a surprise, is it, that Stroll is, again, miles off the pace in qualifying. But, I mean, even if he was on the pace of Alonso, it wouldn't make a difference because Aston Martin are way too slow to get into Q2. Marco Catania says, Caterham, Marussia, and HRT Trio Reborn. Not quite sure it's as bad as that. But, yeah. Those three, Williams, Aston Martin, and Cadillac, they are comfortably the three slowest teams on the grid. I don't think there is any doubt about that. And I'd say at this point, Williams are probably a back marker team more than a midfield team. Because, you know, when you've got teams like Alpine and Audi who are, you know, lapping it like a second a lap quicker than you in qualifying, how can you really call yourself a midfield team? Let me just scroll up the chat to see what you guys are having to say. Astra earlier saying there is a bit of recency bias in greatest list. Previous eras had far fewer races, far less reliable cars, and were many times more risky and require much better driving to simply survive along. True. But yeah, Q2 will be 15 minutes long and will be underway in just a moment. Let me just get the other graphics ready for Q2. There you go. So now we'll be knocking out the next 6 slowest cars from 11th to 16th place. This will be a bit more interesting because it is not certain really who should be knocked out in Q2. Both Racing Bulls look likely to miss out. You'd say Colapinto as well, but I mean, he was ahead of Gasly there in Q1. So we'll have to see. But yeah, this will be definitely a lot more interesting than what we saw in Q1, where, again, the drivers eliminated were very much expected to be eliminated. Carlos Sainz, by the way, doing the fastest time for Williams, 4.5 tenths quicker than Albon. Sainz did a 1:34.3. That's going to be about 3 seconds away from pole, just to show you how far off the pace Williams are. And yeah, tomorrow, I think Williams are going to end up at least a couple laps down on Mercedes, who win the race. Maybe even 3 laps down if they end up losing a load of time in the race for whatever reason. But Mercedes did not show their full hand at all in Q1. I think we'll see a bit more of their hand in this session. Again, they should be doing at worst a mid 131 in this qualifying session when we get to Q3. But I think a low 131 is probably potentially the best they can do. And yeah, they were a couple seconds away from that. So clearly running their engine in a much more conservative mode. They don't need to be pushing super hard in Q1. But Q2 has now begun, and I will sync up the timer at the 14-minute mark. As we're looking here at a Mercedes of Antonelli, I think it is. Already out there on the circuit. As that is the world champion Lando Norris released from the garage. Quickly followed by teammate Piastri. As the two Red Bulls come out as well. And obviously one important thing to look out for in this session is, can Red Bull get both cars into Q3? If they can, then they should be able to get 7th on the grid in Q3. Because I think, yeah, if you're doing well enough to get both cars in, then really that's where you should be. As Leclerc now on the track. Leclerc had a pretty good season so far. I know it's only been one race and one sprint, but looks really on it. But just doesn't have a fast enough car, unfortunately, to be winning. As we look at, again, I'm pretty sure it's Antonelli. Weaving up to the final corner to get those tyres up to temperature. Yeah, it is Antonelli. Who begins his first Q2 lap. And, well, to get into Q2, or to get into Q3, you're going to need to do probably a 1 minute 32 lap time to absolutely make sure. I think the slowest lap time you can do to get away with getting into Q3 will probably be a 1:33.2, 1:33.3. But yeah, if you do a 1 minute 32 lap time anywhere in the 1:32s, then that should be good enough to get into Q3. As Russell does a purple first sector. Antonelli there quickly passing a Haas. As Kimi coming through the final corner before the back straight. And this is where Mercedes pull out their advantage. Absolutely zooming down to the hairpin. Not the greatest exit, but still good enough. As he uses all the exit curb and comes to the line and only does a 1:32.9. So I'm going to assume they're on used tyres, as Russell does a 1:32.5. 4/10 quicker. So yeah, Mercedes have got to be on used soft tyres. Because I was expecting a bit more than that of a lap time gain. Leclerc goes second, 1:32.9. Here comes Lewis Hamilton to the purple middle sector. He goes now up to second place. There's Mercedes, Ferrari, Mercedes, as Isaac Hadjar there struggling with grip on the exit of the final corner. He's still got a slight bit of battery left as he burns it all to the line and goes fifth. 1:33.2. So yeah, that's, or no, 1:33.3. So he's right on the cusp, I think, is Hadjar. Norris only goes a 10th quicker. So not a great lap time there for Norris or Piastri, who actually goes slower than Isaac Hadjar. So McLaren have got going to have to improve on that. Max Verstappen does a good lap time, 1:33.1. He is up to 5th. About a 10th quicker than Norris. Here comes Hulkenberg. who goes ninth, only slightly slower by a few thousandths compared to Piastri. So here comes Oliver Bearman through the final corner as Esteban Ocon goes 10th. Oliver Bearman goes 6th, only slightly slower than what do you call it? Than Verstappen. So Bearman up into the top 6, and then it's Norris, Hadjar, Piastri, Hulkenberg, and then Ocon 11th, Bortoleto in 12th. Bortoleto 6/10 slower than Hulkenberg, his teammate, so clearly must have made a mistake somewhere because that is not normal for him. Now we're just waiting for the 2 Alpines and the 2 Racing Bull cars. Gasly is doing a brilliant lap. 6/10 up on Hulkenberg. Gasly's on a special lap as Lindblad goes 12th, which is not great, but puts him kind of in the fight. Yeah, Gasly, if he keeps this up, he is going to go comfortably into the top 5, may even get into right in there with the Ferrari and Mercedes cars. As Lawson looks like he's on a better lap, at least, than his teammate. As Gasly to the line. Yeah, loses quite a bit in the final sector, but he does go 8th. So Pierre Gasly up to 8th as Colapinto goes 13th. Colapinto 3/10 off his teammate, or 3.5 off, still not quite good enough. Saying that, even if he did a what would be at worst a good enough time, he would only probably be a position higher. So he's doing a lot better than he did in sprint qualifying, as Lawson goes 14th. So 14th and 15th for Racing Bulls. Racing Bulls do look like they are the slowest of the midfield teams remaining. So not really a surprise that they are around those positions. But yeah, currently Russell at the head of the pack, ahead of Hamilton, Leclerc, Antonelli, Verstappen, Bearman. What a lap by him. And then Norris, Gasly, pretty good lap by him as well. And then Hadjar and Piastri. And then in the drop zone, Hulkenberg, Ocon, Colapinto, Lawson, Lindblad, and Bortoleto. Piastri, he has done a 1:33.3. He's going to need, really, I think at least a couple tenths of a second extra to get himself into Q3. And same goes for Isaac Hadjar as well. But Max Verstappen in 5th, I think, is just about safe. And I'd say probably, I'd say Oliver Bearman maybe just about as well is safe, I think. But yeah, Norris, Gasly, Hadjar, and Piastri definitely have got to improve. As we look at George Russell still in the pits, and maybe he'll come back out, but he doesn't need to because he's already done a good enough lap time, easily good enough lap time to get into Q3. As we look now at Esteban Ocon, currently in 12th. With Bearman up in 6th, I mean, Ocon needs to be getting into Q3 if Bearman's going to be that quick. Ocon, of course, was fighting entire Grand Prix last week in Melbourne with Pierre Gasly for that final point and ultimately lost the battle. As Oscar Piastri took pole position at this Grand Prix last year. And now, this year, he's looking like he'll probably be happy if he gets in the top 5. Just shows you how far off McLaren have dropped off in the space of a year. Not even a year, just a few months, with obviously these new regulations. As Piastri comes through the final corner. And here we go. Oscar Piastri starts what will probably be his final Q2 lap. Ideally for him, it will be, as he fights the car over the bump on the entry to turn 2. Goes through turn 3. Looks pretty good through there. And first sector is good. Now into the heart of the middle sector. The long corners as Leclerc does a purple first sector. Piastri now through turn 9 and 10, the double left-handers, before you then race up to turn 11. And then a quick right-hander of 12. And then a very long turn 13 where you're just battling to get on the power as early as possible. And now you begin the long stretch all the way down 1 kilometer down to turn 14, the hairpin, as Leclerc is a couple tenths up on Russell on his current lap. Leclerc looks like he's going to do probably a 132.2 or a 132.3, which is pretty good lap. As Oscar Piastri goes 5th. And yeah, Piastri, he's done a good enough job there. He will be getting into Q3 as Leclerc only slightly goes quicker than Russell, as Hamilton stays 3rd but closes the gap to Russell. And yeah, Ferrari losing a couple tenths in that final sector, and we all know why that is. It's the engine. As here's Lando Norris. He now goes 5th. So yeah, both McLarens, I think, are now into Q3. So it's between Behrman in 8th, I would say, down to Bortoletto in 16th. As we're looking at Nico Hülkenberg here on his final lap. Can he get at least one Audi into the top 10? As Antonelli is on a new lap, so is Russell. Russell, though, has done a very slow first sector, so clearly he's backed off. Maybe he had some traffic or something. Hülkenberg, about a 10th up on Hadjar after the middle sector. It's an improvement so far, but doesn't quite feel to me like this is going to be a lap that's going to get Hülkenberg into the top 10. As he comes down to the hairpin, brakes hard, meets the apex nicely. As through the final corner he comes. Does he get into the top 10? No, he doesn't. He misses out by 0.02 of a second. Hülkenberg is out in Q2. Here's Antonelli, who goes quickest by half a tenth. So 132.443. Still about a second away from what Mercedes did yesterday. Here comes Isaac Hadjar. To the line. Stays 10th. Going to be very close as to whether he gets in to the top 10. Verstappen improves up to 6th. He's definitely through. As, oh, yellow flag. Don't know what for. It's into the final corner, so someone has gone off. I presume. Oh, yeah, it's an Audi. It's Bortoletto. He's gone off into the gravel. He's got going again. And he's going to take to the pit lane, thankfully. But he's just cost whoever that Racing Bulls car was. He's just cost them. I think it was Lindblad. The chance of possibly getting through. But there are cars still out there. Pierre Gasly's still out there. And the yellow flag is gone now, so that won't affect Gasly. As Behrman pits, I think Behrman's safe. As here comes Pierre Gasly. Up to 5th. Brilliant lap. And he's into Q3. Congrats. The gas man. As Piastri stays in 8th. Colapinto, Gasly's teammate. Only 12th. And not good enough, quite frankly. He should have been making the top 10 there. He was close to making the top 10, only 5 thousandths of a second away, but yeah, he should have made the top 10. As Lando Norris does another lap. Where does he go? He goes up to 5th. And Russell saying on the radio, something is not right with the car. I've got a major understeer, box to check the car. Russell says it's like the front wing is broken, prepare another front wing. So, potential issues there for Russell. Let's just see a quick replay as now Q2 is over. Let's see a replay of what happened to Bortoleto into the final corner. He did touch the outside curb coming into the final corner, but not that much. And then, yeah, violently just speared the car. And he did hit the barriers. Not enough to fully damage the car, but yeah, that was... that would have been a weird moment behind the wheel for Bortoleto. I don't think he would have expected that, and a shame. Because, and yeah, I think he tried to do what drivers do nowadays, maximise the turn-in by taking as wide of an entry, and he just went slightly too wide on the entry. And that's why he went into the barriers briefly. We'll see what happens with Russell there with his front wing. They're just checking his front wing. Anyway, Q2 is over. Let's go through the drivers who are into Q3. Kimi Antonelli, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly, Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Oliver Behrman, and Isaac Hadjar. And knocked out in Q2, Nico Hulkenberg, Franco Colapinto, Esteban Ocon, Liam Lawson, Arvid Lindblad, and Gabriel Bortoleto. And Q3 will be underway in the next, 3 or 4 minutes. But, yeah, shame to not see one of the Audis in the top 10. Like I said, Colapinto should have made the top 10. And then, yeah, congrats, obviously, to Gasly and Behrman. Not a surprise they made the top 10. They've looked like top 10 runners all weekend. But, yeah, congrats to them anyways. And well done to Hadjar for just about getting himself into the top 10 as well. Doing as well as he could in that aspect. Because, I mean, it was so close between him, Hulkenberg, and Colapinto, and Ocon. He could have easily ended up 12th or 13th on the grid. But now he's got a chance of maybe getting a decent position for the race. Remember, Hadjar was, what was he, 7th on the grid in the Racing Bulls last year. Be some effort for him to do that this year in the Red Bull, which is a weird statement to say, but that's just the way it is with Red Bull at the moment. But, yeah, Q3 will be a 13-minute long session. Top 10 shootout. And we'll see who does get pole and whether Russell is going to be affected possibly here by an issue. But let me quickly finish up this poll in the chat where I asked you guys who will take pole position for the Chinese Grand Prix. 166 votes. Thank you for voting if you did. And 84% of the vote going for George Russell. 16% for Antonelli. And yeah, as long as Russell isn't affected here by whatever this front wing thing is he talked about, then yeah, Russell should Still get pole, and I still, by the way, think that Mercedes are still holding back a lot of performance. Again, Antonelli did a 132.4, as it looks like Mercedes are they preparing a new front wing? Looked like they potentially were there for a moment, not sure. Um, yeah, Mercedes in Q2 did a 132.4. In sprint qualifying yesterday, they did a 131.5. I don't see why they can't get near that today. So, yeah. For anyone out there thinking Ferrari are going to be right there with Mercedes, I'm afraid your bubble is about to be burst. Because Mercedes are about to show their true performance when obviously they need to. As we're seeing a replay here of Colapinto talking to Flavio, and Flavio giving Colapinto a bit of a hug, bit of a better treatment than apparently he was in the Drive to Survive series that covered the last Formula One season. But yeah, Colapinto, he should have got into the top 10 there, especially with where Gasly ended up. But now we wait for the start of the shootout of Q3. As we look there at the Ferrari. Ferrari have been, so far in this session, comfortably quicker than McLaren, and they will hope to keep it that way because, I mean, they're not expecting to get pole. They're not expecting to get even on the front row. But if they can get on the second row with both cars, that will be good for them for the start of tomorrow's race because they'll be able to put Mercedes under a lot of pressure at the start. But in terms of the fight for pole, Mercedes really should dominate this. As Q3 has begun, I'll sync up the timer at the 12-minute mark, which is in about 35 seconds from now. And yeah, we've got both Mercedes and both Ferrari cars on track. Will Mercedes immediately get into the 131s? We'll see. From a Mercedes point of view, you would think that, yeah, surely they can. As all, George Russell has stopped on track. He's out of turn 3. He has stopped. Can he get going again? His the lights on his steering wheel are going haywire. But yeah, clearly there's an issue. I think they're trying to do a reset. And yep, has he got going? Yes, he has. But well, can he keep the car going until he gets back to the pits? We'll see. Mercedes will be desperately hoping he can get back to the pits, but this adds a lot more drama to this session than Mercedes really needed. As here is his teammate Kimi Antonelli starting his first attempt at pole position. And with Russell having trouble, is this Antonelli's time to take pole and take advantage of his teammates' troubles? As Antonelli does a good first sector there, 24-0. As Antonelli now into turn 9 and 10. Lap looking good so far. No issues that I can see from the overhead shot they're showing of Kimi as he passes his teammate there, going very slowly through turn 13. And yeah, I think Russell is just trying to crawl back to the pits. Still another 10 minutes to go in qualifying. So, you know, if it's a quick fix that they can do in the pits, then, or in the garage, then that could save Russell's day. As here comes Antonelli through the final corner. What is the lap time? It is a 1:32.3, still way slower than what they did yesterday. Ferrari, remember yesterday, they did a 1:32, I think 1. As Leclerc does a 1:32.6. Maybe the track is slower today. As Lewis Hamilton only goes third, 4/10 slower than his teammate. Not a great start there. Only a 1:33.0 for Hamilton. That's quite a poor lap. Here comes Oliver Behrman, who goes fourth on a 1:34 on a 1:33.9. As Russell has made it back to the pits. Here is Lewis Hamilton on the entry to turn 9. Gets through turn 9 and then oversteers on the exit at 9 and then in the entry to turn 10. So that would have cost him, about half a second. So Hamilton's got a lot more time in the bag. And here's Leclerc in turn 11. Hits the apex. But then scruffy through turn 12, which would have cost him maybe a tenth or so. So both Ferraris have got a bit more in the bag. As we're now looking at Gasly and the two McLarens. What can they do? Can McLaren take advantage of Ferrari not doing the best laps so far? As Pierre Gasly through the final corner puts the Alpine in 5th behind Behrman. Only, I think, a 10th behind Behrman. Lando Norris goes 2nd. So McLaren do take advantage of Ferrari's woes. Can they do it with both cars? Here comes Oscar Piastri. He does go 2nd. So McLaren are currently 2nd and 3rd. Both McLarens out of both Ferraris for the moment. Here comes Isaac Hadjar. Only 6th. And Max Verstappen replaces him in 6th. Verstappen only goes a couple hundredths quicker than Hadjar. Which is, surprising. I think Max has probably got a bit more lap time, though, in his pocket that he can find. But George Russell currently in 10th. Have they fixed whatever issue is plaguing that Mercedes? They've still got another probably 3 minutes until they need to get out on track. So they've got another 3 minutes to fix whatever was wrong. As McLaren are just getting back to the pits. Most cars are back to the pits. Except, 2 McLarens, 2 Red Bulls, and Gasly as well. So 6 minutes to go in qualifying. And, well, other than Russell having his issue, it's all going mostly how I expected. Mercedes at the front, and then followed by the 2 McLarens, 2 Ferraris, and then Max. And then Hadjar, and then Behrman, Gasly. So, bit of a difference in the midfield there towards the rear of the field. But yeah, Russell, if he gets out on track and he's got full power, then I don't see why he can't be at least on the front row. It does feel like, though, that the track is yeah, a bit slower than it was yesterday by maybe a couple tenths or so. So I still think Mercedes, though, should be getting into the 131s, even if the track is 2 or 3 tenths slower than yesterday. So I still think there's a lot more potential there. As Red Bull here just replacing, I think, their tyres, getting ready for the final run. If Russell does get out there and puts a lap time down good enough for the front row, then Red Bull probably will end up on the 4th row, which is as good as they can do. They just don't have the pace to be any higher on the grid. There's Oliver Behrman, currently in 8th. As the crowd anticipate these final few minutes of qualifying. Just over 4 more minutes. Who will get pole? Will it be Antonelli? Or will Russell come racing out of the pits after that issue and grab pole position? And can Ferrari get ahead of McLaren? Or will McLaren maintain what would be a great result for them ahead of the 2 Ferraris and both Red Bulls, as well as the McLarens have already got back out there? Ferrari have got both cars out there now. Antonelli's out on track. And Gasly as well, just about coming out of the pit lane. I think, yeah, he is. I thought he just stopped there for a second, but he was just waiting. Behrman has come out. Here comes the Red Bull cars. As, by the way, for George Russell, they did give him a new steering wheel. He still, though, has not left the garage. It takes, what, a couple minutes to do an outlap here? So he's got another, what? He needs to get out of the pit lane in the next, what, 40 seconds. As here is Kimi Antonelli. Can he take advantage and assert himself as a championship contender? If Russell can't get out there on track, then Antonelli must take pole. And here he comes. And Russell does leave the garage. We'll see if his car is in full working order. But here comes Antonelli on his final attempt to take pole position. Remember, he has never taken pole. And he is looking to become the youngest man ever to take pole position in Formula One. Can he do it? First sector is about as good as he did previously. As Lando Norris has just completed the first sector and does a purple first sector. Very strong from Lando Norris. He's been pretty good this weekend, even though he's behind his teammate for the moment. Leclerc does not improve his first sector, but it's about matching what he did anyway. Antonelli, purple middle sector, but only half a tenth quicker than he did previously. This is not as great of a lap as I was expecting from Antonelli, to be honest, but it might still be good enough for pole. As he races down to the hairpin. Leclerc now does a purple middle sector, proving Ferrari's brilliant car through the corners, but it's not all about the corners here, unfortunately. Round the final corner, to the line. Antonelli does a 1:32.0. If Russell has full power now, I'm not sure if that's going to be good enough, but we'll find out. As here comes Lando Norris to the line. Stays in 3rd. He didn't improve in the final sector. Here comes Leclerc, currently in 4th. He goes up to second. He's on the front row currently. Here's Lewis Hamilton. To the line. He puts it on the front row. He's out-qualified Leclerc. As here is Pierre Gasly. 6th. What a lap. Puts ahead of Max Verstappen. Oliver Behrman goes 7th. As we're now seeing the Red Bulls, as Russell, by the way, has completed the first sector. I don't know how good the first sector is, though. It's not a purple sector. As Isaac Hadjar goes 7th, but behind Gasly. Where does Verstappen go? He goes 7th, so Pierre Gasly has outqualified both Red Bulls. What a lap by Gasly. As Russell is a 10th off Antonelli after the first 2 sectors. Can he pull back the time in this final sector? It's still close enough that he can do it. Down the long back straight he comes. And brakes hard now for the hairpin. As he now enters the final corner and throws it in. Looked good. To the line. No, it's only second. And there you go. We have our youngest pole sitter in Formula One history, Kimi Antonelli, on pole for the Chinese Grand Prix. Mercedes take the front row, not by as far as we expected, but they are on the front row despite those issues there for Russell. But Antonelli, comfortably now, is the youngest pole sitter in Formula One history. And tomorrow needs to assert himself by winning the race and assert himself as a championship contender. Congrats to the young Italian. Antonelli on pole, Russell 2nd, Lewis Hamilton 3rd. How good is it to see Hamilton more so back to the form of old? Leclerc in 4th. Ferrari, though, will be happy. 2nd row lockout with the starts that they're getting. There's a pretty good chance that they could be in the lead on the first lap. 3rd row, Piastri 5th, Norris 6th. McLaren will be disappointed, but they're still at least in decent positions. Pierre Gasly 7th. What a lap by him. And Gasly, I've got to say, I think that is the performance of the day in the Alpine there. Max Verstappen 8th, Isaac Hadjar 9th, Red Bull 8th and 9th on the grid. Absolutely terrible for them. Oliver Behrman in 10th, and then the rest of the field, Hulkenberg, Colapinto, Ocon, Lawson, Lindblad, Bortoletto, and then Sainz, Albon, Alonso, Bottas, Stroll, and Sergio Perez. And that is your field for tomorrow's Chinese Grand Prix. And congrats to Crystal, who says he correctly predicted a Kimi pole. Great to see a new person taking pole and the record for youngest pole sitter being broken. Exactly what we want to see. Before, though, I head off, I just want to ask you guys, who is your driver of the day for qualifying here in China? And your options for driver of the day will be Kimi Antonelli, Lewis Hamilton, Pierre Gasly, and I'm going to throw Valtteri Bottas in there because I think him out qualifying Stroll is still a great effort there for such a new team. But for me, driver of the day, I would have to go with Pierre Gasly. Absolutely super drive from him today. Hopefully this time, compared to the sprint, he can actually convert that into a strong amount of points for Alpine, who have definitely got a good competitive car for 2026, which we expected but didn't quite get to see in Melbourne. But now I think we've properly got to see that, yeah, they have got a proper car that can challenge for points. Looney Classic is good for Kimi, but Russell got handicapped. I don't know what the issue was. Whether it did truly hurt Russell on that final lap in terms of was Russell able to run full power or whatever. But what do you call it? It. I think also it would have affected Russell mentally quite a bit because it would have put him under so much more pressure than he needed to have at that moment. I mean, you're obviously going to always have pressure going into Q3 to deliver pole position, especially in the fastest car, but it was just unnecessary pressure. And, it's led to that. But, I mean, he's still second on the grid. That's not a disaster. And there is a race tomorrow. Mercedes, even if they don't get the great start and they, Ferrari swamp them at the start, Mercedes, I still think should win the race tomorrow. They still do have comfortably the best car. Super Cab says, of course, it takes an issue for Russell to make us eat our provisions. Or I think you mean possibly predictions. I'm not quite sure. But yeah. I think, potentially, I think there was more pace in the Mercedes there than what was shown. I think Russell is quicker than Antonelli around this track. Antonelli was, 3.5 tenths at Hamilton. I think Mercedes are still about half a second clear of Ferrari. Whether that will translate into the race, being half a second clear, we'll see. I think in the race, Ferrari will be probably 2 to 3 tenths a lap slower in clear air than Mercedes. So, yeah, I think Mercedes still are the clear favourites to win. Ferrari, though, I think will be close enough on performance that they can absolutely they can fight to a degree with Mercedes. Probably not for the win, but maybe they could avoid or prevent Mercedes from getting a 1-2. And then you're going to have a pretty big gap, unfortunately, to McLaren, who I think are going to be miles off, unfortunately. And then Red Bull as well, I think will be, comfortably quite far off the pace. So the real fight tomorrow is, Mercedes and possibly Ferrari to a degree, but yeah. Astro saying, would you reconsider doing a race watch along tomorrow, Chazza, please? Nah, no way. After what we saw last week in Melbourne with all the, Mario Kart racing, and plus I still believe that Mercedes is comfortably going to win the race tomorrow. Yeah, I'm not going to bother. But like I said, I will be doing a race watch along in 2 weeks' time for the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. So, yeah, make sure to come along to that in a couple of weeks. And, yeah, in terms of the content plan, I will just get back into that in a moment. But let me just finish up this poll because we've got a clear winner. 15 votes on driver of the day for qualifying. 73% of the votes gone to Antonelli. And then 13% for Gasly and 7% for Hamilton and Bottas. Thank you guys for voting. So tomorrow I will not be doing a race watch along. Monday, though, I will be doing a podcast reviewing the Chinese Grand Prix, so make sure to check that out. And then, next Grand Prix, I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch along. So my next live stream will be on Friday, the Friday night before qualifying in Japan in a couple weeks' time. And then, like I said, I'll be live on Saturday morning and Sunday morning for qualifying and the race, respectively. Thank you guys for coming along for this early morning stream. Great to see so many of you. And I will see you guys, obviously, for the podcast on Monday. Hopefully you guys enjoy the race. Hopefully it's a more competitive, exciting race than I think it will be. But like I said, I still think Mercedes are just too good for the rest of the field. And that's how I think it will end up playing out in the race. Maybe they don't get 1-2, but I definitely think they win the race. I just think they're too strong, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the race tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoy it. I will probably not watch the race live. I probably will watch it probably a few hours after it finishes, but I will obviously make sure to watch it in full and then do my podcast on Monday reviewing it and talking about what happened in the Grand Prix itself. But guys, yeah, cheers for coming along. Make sure to smash the like button before you go. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, because we're doing plenty of qualifying and race watch-alongs for the rest of the season. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed tomorrow's race. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. And until next time, it has been me, Kazza HD. Goodbye.